What happens when one of Hollywood's most charismatic stars walks onto a daytime talk show stage, expecting a thoughtful conversation, only to find himself in the middle of a debate that quickly turns into one of the most uncomfortable moments the show has ever seen. The lights glow bright across the iconic studio set of The View. The audience buzzes with excitement, whispers traveling through the rows of seats like electricity. Today's guest is someone they've been waiting for all week. Cameras glide across the stage. The hosts sit behind the familiar curved desk, papers neatly stacked, coffee mugs steaming under the studio lights. At the center of the anticipation sits the man everyone came to see, Robert Downey Jr. A Hollywood legend, a comeback story, the man who helped redefine the modern superhero era. Across from him sits one of the sharpest voices on daytime television, Sunny Hostin, a former prosecutor, a journalist, someone known for asking questions that others hesitate to ask. And today, those questions are about to spark something no one in the room expected. Before we jump into this intense moment, make sure you subscribe to Stage View, hit that like button, and drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Because the story you're about to hear is one that had the entire studio holding its breath. The show begins the way it always does. Warm smiles, polite applause, a few light jokes. Sunny leans forward slightly, glancing toward Robert with a welcoming smile. "Well, Robert, first of all," she says, her voice smooth and professional, "it's great to have you here." Robert nods politely, flashing the charming grin fans have seen for decades. "Thank you for having me," he replies. "I've always heard this table can be lively." The audience laughs. From the outside, everything feels normal. But something subtle is already shifting. Because while some interviews are about promoting a film, others become something entirely different. Sunny flips a page on her notes. "You've had one of the most fascinating careers in Hollywood," she says. "From your early films to becoming a global icon with Iron Man and the Avengers, Endgame phenomenon." The audience claps again. Robert gives a small bow of his head. "Yeah, it's been quite a ride," he says. But Sunny doesn't stop there. Her tone shifts slightly. "And of course people admire your story of redemption. You've been very open about your past struggles." Robert nods again. Calm. Comfortable. "I try to be," he says. "Because," Sunny continues, leaning forward, "you've spoken publicly about second chances. About accountability." There's a pause. A long one. The audience quiets slightly. Robert senses the shift. "You know," he says carefully, "life tends to give you a few learning opportunities." A few chuckles ripple through the crowd. But Sunny isn't smiling anymore. And that's exactly what I want to talk about today. The studio grows noticeably quieter. Even the other hosts glance towards Sunny, sensing the direction of the conversation. Sunny taps her notes gently. "Because many people see you as an example of someone who was given multiple opportunities to rebuild their career after very public mistakes." Robert nods slowly. "That's fair. But," Sunny continues, "some critics say Hollywood tends to forgive certain people faster than others." The room tightens. Robert's smile fades slightly. He shifts in his chair. "And what do those critics say specifically?" he asks. Sunny meets his gaze directly. "They say that people with power, influence, or popularity often receive redemption arcs, while others are judged far more harshly." A murmur spreads through the audience. The tension is subtle, but undeniable. Robert folds his hands together. "Well," he says calmly, "I think redemption is something everyone deserves the chance to pursue." Sunny nods, but presses further. "But not everyone gets that chance." Robert tilts his head slightly. "That may be true," he says. "But I'm not sure that's something I personally controlled." Sunny doesn't look away. "But you benefited from it." The words hang in the air like a spark waiting for oxygen. One of the other hosts shifts uncomfortably. The audience senses it too. This isn't a friendly chat anymore. Robert leans back slightly. "I'm not sure what you're suggesting," he says. Sunny raises an eyebrow. "I'm suggesting that when someone becomes the face of redemption, it's fair to ask questions about how that redemption happened." Robert exhales slowly. "Well," he replies, "it happened because a lot of people believed in me when I didn't deserve it." That answer draws a wave of applause. But Sunny doesn't join in. Instead, she asks something that changes the entire tone of the room. "And do you think every person struggling the way you once were receives that same belief?" Robert's eyes narrow slightly. Now he understands. This isn't about movies. This isn't about promotion. This is a debate, and the audience can feel it. Robert leans forward now, his voice calm, but firmer. No, he says. And that's exactly the problem. The audience gasps slightly. Sunny tilts her head. So you agree the system is unfair? Robert nods once. Absolutely. That answer surprises everyone. Even Sunny pauses. But, Robert continues, his voice steady, I don't think the solution is to tear down people who manage to climb out of a hole. A few audience members clap. Sunny's expression tightens. No one is tearing you down, she says. We're asking whether the same system that lifted you fails others. Robert pauses. For the first time, he seems slightly irritated. Well, he says slowly, I'm not a system. The audience murmurs again. Sunny leans closer. But you represent something bigger. Robert's voice sharpens slightly. I represent a guy who got lucky and worked his tail off to stay alive long enough to see the other side. The tension is rising now. The studio feels smaller, hotter. The other hosts exchange quick glances. Sunny folds her hands. Some people might say luck and connections played a role. Robert chuckles, but it's not a friendly laugh. Connections, he repeats. Hollywood connections, Sunny clarifies. Robert tilts his head. You mean the same Hollywood that fired me repeatedly in the late 90s? A few audience members clap again. Sunny doesn't react. Yes, she says calmly. But eventually that same industry welcomed you back. Robert's voice lowers. That didn't happen overnight. Sunny nods. But it happened. The words land hard. And suddenly the room feels like it's balancing on a knife's edge. Robert leans forward, elbows on the desk now. Let me ask you something, he says. Sunny doesn't hesitate. Go ahead. Robert's eyes lock onto hers. If someone spends years destroying their own life and then fights their way back, are we supposed to apologize for surviving? The audience erupts into applause. But Sunny raises her hand slightly. Survival is admirable, she says. But accountability is part of the conversation too. Robert nods slowly. Agreed. Sunny's next question comes out sharper than before. So do you think public figures should be held to a higher standard when their past includes behavior that harmed others? The air goes completely still. Robert's expression changes. Not anger. Something deeper. A mixture of reflection and challenge. And when he speaks next, the debate that follows will leave the entire studio stunned. Because what begins as a question about redemption is about to turn into a confrontation no one on The View saw coming. The studio lights suddenly feel brighter. Not warmer, brighter. Like every word now carries weight. Across the table on The View, the atmosphere has shifted from friendly conversation to something far more serious. The audience senses it. The hosts sense it. Even the production crew behind the cameras has gone unusually still. Robert Downey Jr. sits forward now, elbows resting lightly on the table, fingers interlocked as if grounding himself. His usual playful charisma is still there, but it's quieter, more focused. Across from him, Sunny Hostin holds his gaze with the calm intensity of someone who has spent years in courtrooms asking uncomfortable questions. And now, the room is waiting for his answer. Sunny's question still hangs in the air. So do you think public figures should be held to a higher standard when their past includes behavior that harmed others? Robert pauses. Not a quick pause. The kind of pause where the audience begins leaning forward in their seats. Finally, he nods once. Yes, he says quietly. The response surprises some people in the room. Sunny raises an eyebrow. You do? Robert exhales slowly. Of course I do. A few murmurs ripple through the crowd. He continues. If you've been given influence, visibility, the kind of platform I've had for the last 15 years, yeah, you carry responsibility with that. Sunny nods slowly. That's good to hear. But she doesn't stop there. And yet, she says, many critics argue that Hollywood often celebrates redemption stories without fully addressing the damage that came before them. Robert's jaw tightens slightly. Critics say a lot of things, he replies. Sunny leans forward. But some of those critics are the very people who were hurt. The room goes quiet again. Robert blinks slowly, processing the weight of that statement. I don't disagree with that, he says. Sunny studies him. Then let me ask directly. She taps the desk lightly with her pen. When people look at your story, the arrests, the addiction, the public chaos of the late 90s, and then see the massive success that followed with films like Iron Man and Avengers, Endgame. She pauses. Do you think society sometimes celebrates the comeback more than it remembers the consequences? A low hum spreads through the audience. Robert shifts slightly in his chair. You're asking whether people gloss over the ugly parts, he says. Sunny nods. Yes. Robert takes a breath. Well, he says slowly, the ugly parts weren't exactly hidden. Some laughter breaks the tension. But Sunny doesn't smile. True, she says. But there's a difference between something being public and something being fully understood. Robert tilts his head. What do you mean by that? Sunny answers immediately. I mean, addiction doesn't only affect the person going through it. It affects families, colleagues, friends, people who had to pick up the pieces. Robert nods. Absolutely. But, Sunny adds, those people rarely get the spotlight during the redemption arc. The audience murmurs again. Robert leans back slightly, folding his arms now. I see what you're doing, he says. Sunny doesn't look away. What am I doing? You're framing the comeback story as something that might erase accountability. Sunny's voice stays calm. I'm questioning whether the narrative is sometimes incomplete. Robert studies her for a moment. Then he nods slowly. That's fair. The admission catches some people off guard. But Robert isn't finished. But here's the thing, he continues. When you're at the bottom of addiction, you're not exactly writing your own narrative. Sunny tilts her head. So who writes it? Robert smiles faintly. Usually the people who survive long enough to tell it. A ripple of applause breaks through the audience. Sunny waits for it to fade. But survivors also have the responsibility to confront the past honestly, she says. Robert nods again. Agreed. Sunny glances briefly toward the audience before turning back to him. Then let's talk honestly. The words feel like a shift into deeper waters. Robert raises an eyebrow. All right. Sunny flips another page on her notes. You've spoken before about the people who supported your recovery. Yes. Friends in the industry. Yes. Directors who took risks on you. Robert nods. Absolutely. Sunny leans forward again. But many people struggling with addiction don't have those networks. Robert's expression becomes thoughtful. That's true. So, Sunny continues, when audiences celebrate your comeback, do you ever worry it creates the illusion that recovery is just about determination? Robert shakes his head immediately. No. His voice is firm. Recovery is never just determination. Sunny watches him closely. What is it then? Robert takes a moment. Then he answers quietly. It's support. The room softens slightly. It's people who refuse to give up on you, he continues. Even when you've given them every reason to. Sunny nods. That's powerful. But, Robert adds, his tone shifting again, I also think we need to be careful about how we talk about redemption. Sunny raises an eyebrow. Careful in what way? Robert leans forward again. Because sometimes conversations about accountability start sounding like permission to never let people move forward. The audience reacts immediately. A few claps. A few murmurs. Sunny's eyes narrow slightly. Accountability isn't punishment forever. Robert nods. I know. Then what are you suggesting? Robert pauses. Then he says something that sends another wave through the room. I'm suggesting that sometimes people want redemption stories until they actually see one. The audience gasps softly. Sunny tilts her head again. That's interesting. Robert continues. When someone is broken, everyone talks about compassion. Sunny listens carefully. But the moment that person rebuilds their life, Robert says, the conversation suddenly becomes about whether they deserve the chance. The studio grows very quiet. Sunny taps her pen against the desk again. That may be because people want to ensure justice was served. Robert nods slowly. I understand that. But, Robert sighs. But sometimes justice and forgiveness don't move at the same speed. The line hangs in the air. Several audience members clap loudly. Others sit silently. Sunny studies him with the analytical expression of a former prosecutor. Forgiveness is powerful, she says. But justice still matters. Robert nods. Of course it does. Sunny's voice sharpens slightly. And the public has the right to ask difficult questions about powerful figures. Robert smiles faintly. Well, I'm sitting here answering them, aren't I? The audience laughs nervously. Sunny doesn't. Her next words come slower. Yes, you are. She leans forward once more. But the real question is this. The tension returns instantly. Robert's smile fades. Sunny's voice becomes quieter. More precise. Do you believe Hollywood forgave you because of who you are, or because the industry needed someone like you? The audience gasps. Even the other hosts glance at each other. Robert blinks slowly. For the first time since the conversation began, he looks genuinely caught off guard, because the implication behind that question is enormous. And the answer he gives next will push the debate into territory that no one in the studio was prepared for. For a moment, the studio becomes so quiet you can almost hear the faint hum of the cameras. The question still hangs in the air like a spark suspended before a fire. Across the table on The View, the tension has reached a new level. The audience feels it in their shoulders, in the way people stop shifting in their seats, in the way every pair of eyes is locked on the two figures at the center of the storm. Sunny Hostin sits calmly, pen resting on the table, her expression focused and analytical. Across from her, Robert Downey Jr. sits very still. Her question echoes again in the minds of everyone watching. Do you believe Hollywood forgave you because of who you are, or because the industry needed someone like you? It isn't just a question. It's a challenge. Robert exhales slowly, leaning back in his chair as if giving himself a few seconds to think before stepping onto dangerous ground. A faint smile appears on his face. Not the playful one audiences are used to, but the kind that comes when someone realizes the conversation has reached a crossroads. Well, he says quietly, that's a pretty big question. A few nervous chuckles ripple through the crowd. Sunny doesn't react. She simply waits. Robert looks down at the table for a moment, tapping his fingers together as if organizing his thoughts. When he looks up again, his voice is calm, but more direct than before. I think Hollywood forgave me, he says slowly, because someone was willing to take a risk. Sunny tilts her head. Just one person? Robert nods slightly. Sometimes that's all it takes. The audience leans in again. He continues. There was a time when no studio would insure me, he says. No director wanted the liability. No producer wanted the headlines. Sunny nods. That's well documented. Robert spreads his hands slightly. So if someone in that environment decides to give you another chance, that's not some grand industry conspiracy. Sunny responds immediately, but it does raise questions about who gets those chances. Robert smiles faintly. You're right. The answer again surprises some in the audience. Sunny studies him carefully. So let's explore that. Robert nods. Let's. Sunny leans forward again, elbows resting lightly on the desk. You were given a role that changed everything, she says. Robert already knows where she's going. The role of Tony Stark. Several audience members clap as the name is spoken. The character who launched the modern superhero era in Iron Man and helped build the massive cultural phenomenon that eventually culminated in Avengers, Endgame. Sunny continues. That casting decision is now considered legendary. Robert shrugs lightly. At the time, it was considered insane. The audience laughs. Sunny nods. Exactly. She taps her pen on the desk. So when people say your redemption story is inspiring, others argue it also shows how Hollywood takes calculated risks on people it believes will generate profit. Robert raises an eyebrow. Well, he says, Hollywood is a business. Some laughter breaks out. Sunny doesn't smile. And profit often outweighs principle. Robert tilts his head slightly. You think my comeback was purely financial? Sunny responds carefully. I think the industry believed you could deliver something audiences wanted. Robert nods slowly. That part's true. But, Sunny adds, there were other actors without your history who could have played that role. Robert leans forward now, the energy shifting again. And yet they didn't. The audience murmurs. Sunny folds her hands. Why do you think that is? Robert pauses. Then he gives an answer that makes several people in the room glance at each other. Because the story worked. Sunny narrows her eyes slightly. What story? Robert gestures toward himself. The broken guy trying to rebuild his life, playing a character who's also flawed, but trying to do the right thing. A ripple of understanding moves through the crowd. Sunny nods slowly. You're saying audiences connected with the authenticity. Robert nods. Exactly. Sunny tilts her head. But authenticity doesn't erase the past. Robert's voice grows firmer. I never said it did. The tension rises again. Sunny presses further. Then what do you say to people who feel that celebrity redemption arcs are easier to accept than ordinary ones? Robert's answer comes quickly this time. I say that's a fair criticism. The audience reacts again with surprise. Sunny blinks. You agree? Robert nods. Of course. Sunny leans back slightly, clearly reassessing the direction of the conversation. Then why do you seem defensive about the question? Robert chuckles softly. I'm not defensive. Sunny raises an eyebrow. You're not. Robert shakes his head. No. He pauses. But I do think something interesting happens in conversations like this. Sunny gestures for him to continue. Robert looks briefly toward the audience before turning back to her. People talk about redemption like it's a trophy someone wins. Sunny watches him closely. But it's not, Robert continues. It's a process, one that never really ends. The room quiets again. And the truth is, he says, I'll probably spend the rest of my life trying to make up for the person I used to be. That line lands heavily. Some audience members clap softly. Sunny nods. That level of honesty is important. Robert shrugs slightly. It's also unavoidable. Sunny studies him again. Then she asks something that changes the emotional tone of the entire discussion. Do you ever feel, she says quietly, that the public still sees you as the man you were in the late 90s? Robert's eyes soften. For the first time in the conversation, he looks almost reflective. Sometimes, he admits. The audience listens closely now. But honestly, he continues, that's probably healthy. Sunny tilts her head. Healthy. Robert nods. If people forget the worst things you've done, you might forget them too. A murmur spreads across the studio. Sunny nods slowly. That's a powerful perspective. Robert smiles faintly. I've had a lot of time to think about it. Sunny glances down at her notes one more time. Then she looks back up. And yet, she says carefully, there's still a larger question here. Robert sighs slightly, already sensing where she's heading. Sunny's voice becomes more serious. When society celebrates redemption stories like yours, are we encouraging accountability, or are we simply entertaining ourselves with comeback narratives? The audience gasps again. Even the other hosts shift in their seats. Robert's expression tightens, because this question isn't just about him anymore. It's about fame, power, culture, and the way the world tells stories about second chances. Robert leans forward slowly, resting his hands on the table again. When he speaks next, his voice carries a new intensity. And what he says will push the entire room into the most explosive moment of the interview. A moment that will leave the host stunned, the audience divided, and the conversation on The View spiraling into a confrontation no one will forget. The room feels heavier now, charged with a tension that's almost physical. Every word exchanged between Robert Downey Jr. and Sunny Hostin is being felt, measured, dissected by everyone in the studio, and by the millions who will see it online later. Robert's hands are now flat on the desk, shoulders squared. There's no playfulness left, only a raw honesty that seems to make the studio lights brighter than ever. The audience sits in rapt silence, some leaning forward in disbelief, others whispering to neighbors, unsure whether they should clap or stay quiet. The tension is a living thing moving across the room, wrapping itself around every person watching. Sunny leans slightly forward, eyes steady, voice calm but piercing. Robert, it's clear your story resonates with millions. But let me ask you, when people celebrate your redemption, do you think they fully understand what that cost was? Not just for you, but for everyone involved. Robert exhales, a deep, measured sound that fills the quiet. I think that's always the risk, isn't it? His gaze sweeps the room, meeting not just Sunny's eyes but the audience's, as if acknowledging the weight of public scrutiny. People love a comeback story because it's hopeful. They want to believe that no matter how far someone falls, there's a way back. But hope it's messy. It doesn't erase mistakes, and it doesn't erase pain. The audience murmurs softly. A few nod, recognizing the truth in his words. The other hosts exchange glances, sensing that the conversation has moved beyond scripted talking points into territory that feels painfully real. Sunny leans back slightly, measuring her next words. And yet, the reality is that the same spotlight that celebrates you can also hold you accountable, or criticize you, or demand that you explain every decision along the way. Robert pauses, his expression thoughtful. The room holds its breath. You're right, he says finally, voice low and deliberate. And that's something I live with every day. Because the man I was, he left a trail. And I can't just walk away from it. I don't want to walk away from it. There's a brief, almost imperceptible silence. Then Sunny asks the question that seems to tilt the conversation into full-blown confrontation. So when the public praises your transformation, do you think they sometimes do it to feel better about themselves rather than to understand the gravity of what happened? Robert leans in now, his tone sharper, more intense. Maybe some do, he admits. But that doesn't mean my journey is any less real. That doesn't mean that the work I put in to rebuild my life, my family, my career, was for show. It was survival. And anyone who's been through it knows. There's no applause on the nights you're alone, trying not to fall apart. The audience reacts audibly this time. A collective breath seems to escape the room. Whispers ripple through the crowd, a mixture of awe, empathy, and shock. Even Sunny pauses for a moment, recognizing the honesty and vulnerability in his voice. And Robert continues, softer now, if we only focus on the narrative, the comeback, the story of the star reborn, we risk forgetting the complexity. Life doesn't come in neat arcs. Redemption doesn't either. It's messy. It's uneven. And it doesn't belong only to the privileged few who get a second chance in the public eye. Sunny nods, acknowledging the point, but her voice tightens with purpose. So what's your message to people who look up to you? To young actors, or anyone struggling with addiction, mistakes, or societal judgment? Robert leans back slightly, gaze sweeping the audience once more. That it's possible to fight your way back. That it's worth asking for help, accepting help, and owning your story, even the ugly parts. But also that the journey is personal. No one else can live it for you. And no one else can decide your redemption for you. A soft, stunned applause begins in the audience, growing steadily as the weight of his words sinks in. Some are clapping for the honesty. Some are clapping for the courage to confront uncomfortable truths in a space where it's easy to hide behind charm and humor. Sunny's face softens slightly, respect evident in her expression. That's a conversation worth having, she says, and one that the public rarely gets to hear so openly. Robert smiles faintly, the first real warmth returning to his face. Then I'm glad we had it. The show moves toward its conclusion, but the energy in the room has changed. There's a sense of witnessing something rare, not just an interview, but a confrontation with truth, accountability, and the messy reality of fame and forgiveness. As the cameras pan to the audience for one final shot, murmurs of discussion ripple through the rows. Social media notifications are already buzzing with clips of the exchange, debates forming in real time about celebrity redemption, accountability, and privilege. Headlines are inevitable. Tweets fly by in seconds. RDJ and Sunny Hostin debate redemption and accountability on The View, jaw-dropping honesty. And for the viewers at home, the conversation lingers. Questions are raised that don't have easy answers. Opinions clash. But one thing is certain. The interview won't be forgotten. Robert stands, smiling politely, waving to the audience. Sunny remains seated a moment longer, thoughtful, letting the words resonate. The applause crescendos, but it's more than appreciation. It's recognition of something real, something human, something that made everyone present confront their own assumptions. And as the screen fades to the closing shot, a voiceover calls out, almost as if directly to the viewer. What do you think? Was Robert Downey Jr.'s redemption story about luck, accountability, or both? Share your opinion in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to Stage View for more explosive, dramatic, and unforgettable celebrity stories. Hit like if you felt the tension, and join the conversation. We want to hear your voice. Because the moment on The View wasn't just an interview. It was a reminder that the stories we tell about ourselves, about others, and about redemption are never as simple as they seem.